Good morning. My name's Adrian Jolly. I'm the compliance lead at PTI Smarter Venues. In wake of the recent COVID-19 outbreak, we thought it may be helpful to give some practical steps of how clubs and organisations can begin to plan for their remote working strategy. So for the next 10 minutes, what I'd like to do is to give a very quick update of what we know so far, and then give 7 key steps that you can use to help planning your working from home strategy. A to-do list for you to literally tick through it, and then where can you get some more help. So what do we know? Clearly this is fast moving, and it's a fluid situation, but what we do know is this. COVID-19 is part of the cold and flu family. Symptoms will vary per person, but many are similar to the flu. We hear stories of high fever, continuous coughing. The majority of people will make a full recovery. Unfortunately, the vulnerable may not. Most at risk include the 70+ population and those with existing health conditions. Those infected are required to quarantine for 14 days, as is their family around them. UK government is now moving towards mandatory isolation, as we all heard Boris Johnson yesterday saying he urges us to work from home. So the time for action is now. So step 1, understanding your processes. Key to survival is to understand what you actually need to do and when you need to do it in the correct timeframes. So, do you have a documented list of all your processes completed by the organisation? If you've done your GDPR planning, that may well form part of it. Do you know when each process needs to be completed by? Are there certain timeframes? Is it certain times of the month? And how does the impact of the suspension of professional games impact that? Have you evaluated the criticality of completing the processes? So what actually happens if you don't do it? Is it reputational impact? Is there financial impact? Potentially regulatory, depending on where you are? What's the impact? Now prioritise them in line with your appetite. So which ones do we really want to do and in what timeframes? And then also understand whether these are manual processes or they need face-to-face interaction. Step 2. Once you understand your processes, you need to understand what systems you need to do them. Common sense. Do you know all the systems that your organisation uses? Have you then mapped them against the processes you identified in step 1? Are they hosted by the club or are they web hosted? Are the processes available? If not, understand what you may do if you are going to be able to do them. Is a technology enabler required for remote working, e.g. a Citrix, a wraparound platform to deliver the applications? Have the appropriate IT security protocols been applied? i.e. is there 2-factor authentication? Do people still log in appropriately? Have you segregated your environment? Although we're in this nasty situation, we still need to protect the data we have. Step 3, the people. Inevitably, a person is always required to complete or press a button to enable a process. Do we understand how many employees are required to complete each process on a daily basis? Does the number of employees differ when we're in this business continuity style event where we may not be doing all the processes? Are all the employees per team identified and known, including contact details? Have any key employees been identified? Are procedures available for remote working? So do they understand how they're going to do this? And what's the expectation of staff who are not required to work? So if they're not critical and they're not doing, are they waiting or are they forming a shift pattern? How are we going to manage these people? Step 4, the third party, the supply chain. This can make the difference between survival and failure of any organisation. Do you know all your critical third parties? Have you got up-to-date contact details for them? Have you discussed with them what plans they have for remote working? Because if they're not working, that may materially impact your organisation. Do any of the plans created by the third party affect how you will work or you plan to work? Have you tested it? If you haven't tested it, it may not work. Step 5, testing. You're not going to know whether it works unless you've tested it. Have all the applications and systems been accessed remotely? Does the testing include all those externally hosted systems? Have you performed a load or capacity test? It's great doing 1 or 2 people, but when you have the entire organisation working from it, will this thing still work? If issues were identified, is there a documented workaround? How will you cope with when you're having to do this for real? Step 6. As with all processes, control and governance is key. It's around managing the risks we have. So for the employees, do you have a documented remote working policy and procedures for employees at home? Do the documents include all the requirements an employee needs to know to work from home? The up-to-date antivirus on their PC, that they can't work from an internet cafe, they can't print documentation. Do they actually understand that? Have employees signed a document accepting working from home? And continue the governance side of things. Is there an existing command structure for a crisis? So who's in charge? Who will make those right decisions? If not, it clearly needs to be created. Who's the membership of that crisis team? And what are their specific roles? And unfortunately, as we know, those people may also become ill or unavailable. So what alternatives have been established? So when those people aren't available, who will then take up that reign? And we need to document the decision-making criteria. So how will they make these decisions and then be able to evidence it? Step 7, the gotchas. Once we've completed all the testing, we've defined our strategy, we've got all our processes, we've got all the right people, we know it's gonna be fine, there are always going to be gotchas and there's always going to be something that puts a spanner in the works. So, home broadband reliability. Our broadband providers are comfortable that broadband will survive. I think it's going to be stress tested. We're going to find out when we're all working from home, we're all using broadband, the children are off from school, they'll be using their Xboxes and using the broadband, as will Sky. We'll see how reliable that is, but that may impact our ability to do this. Do you actually need anyone on site? So it's great we're saying the IT systems will be up and running, but do we need someone to do backup tapes? Do we need someone to press buttons to make things work for us? Productivity may slip. We've got to be realistic. The fact that people are working from home, some people won't work as hard. Some people will be distracted by things like children and what's going on in the news. We have to accept it's not going to be as slick as it was in the office. We are undoubtedly going to face staff shortages. Unfortunately, people will become ill. If they're not ill, they may be looking after their loved ones. So we have to accept that we may not have the full complement of staff we wanted. And number 5 is cash flow. We all know the impact to the clubs, the fact that the games are suspended. Our third parties will also be impacted. So how are we comfortable that we're going to be able to pay our staff and keep them happy because they've got their own bills as well? So we need to consider that. So your key steps or your to-do list. Number 1, identify your key processes. Understand what you need to do and when you need to do it. Number 2, understand what systems you need to support those processes. Understand what staffing you need to do to complete those. Identify your key third parties and open up those discussions. Make sure that your plans are in synergy and similar where they need to be. Test the capability, because if you don't test it, you don't know it works. And understand what governance is required, including command structure. So when are you going to make that decision? When are you going to come back to the office? Someone needs to be making that decisions, and it needs to be all documented. And number 7, understand those gotchas. Understand that despite all the top 6 things and all the good things you've done, those gotchas may still render your plans ineffective. That was a very quick whistle-stop tour. It's a big conversation. It's a big subject. If you would like to know any more or want greater clarity on the points I raised, my contact details are on this slide. I wish you all well, and we'll see you on the other side of this.